Alright guys, so today I'm going to be giving a basic tutorial on how to make a Reese bass. Reese basses are a very versatile sound. Usually I like to start with them and then feed them into post-processing. They're really good for a lot of different purposes, such as just being a low mid filler, an aggressive element, or just a lead even if you pitch them up a little bit. So before we actually go into making Reese basses, I think the important thing to understand is fundamentally what is going on with a Reese. And there is no better way to do that than to open up Desmos and just use some math. So here I went ahead and opened up Desmos and I made a basic SAW3 waveform. For those of you who don't know, SAW3 is just the first three harmonics. It's pretty simple. Every waveform can just be made up of a bunch of sine waves because of the Fourier transform, so it's pretty easy to just put in waveforms. Obviously, you're going to have more harmonics in like a synthesizer, but for demonstration purposes, this is fine. So to make a Reese bass, you want to have at least three oscillators, and you want to detune them so that they're playing at slightly different frequencies, something like this. So as you can see, they're very close, but each oscillator is slightly different, and so the way I did that in Desmos is just by making more functions and just multiplying their frequency by a variable that is due to the detuning. So it's pretty simple. So as you can see, they start close together, and then as the sound continues on, they get further and further apart. Then eventually they start overlapping again at certain points, and then eventually they become closer together and almost join up again, and then the pattern repeats. So the reason why this creates a more interesting sound is because when you add all the waveforms together, which will be what happens, we see that we have a very interesting waveform that goes through a lot of modulation of its harmonics and its amplitude. So we can see it starts off as just a normal SAW3, and then it slowly gets quieter. Then slowly some of the harmonics disappear, leaving a more simple waveform. As the sound progresses, more harmonics disappear, and it becomes looking more like a sine wave. Then more harmonics get added in, they disappear again, and then they start coming back, and then eventually you have a full SAW3 wave again. So you're effectively going to have a sound that is constantly evolving, and this sounds way more natural than just a standard SAW3 waveform. The reason why is because if you think about it, this mimics real life. If you have a bunch of violinists playing in an orchestra, though they may be playing in tune, they won't all be exactly having their fingers at the same place on the fingerboard, causing some natural, small, and non-noticeable detuning, which will have a similar effect to this Reese bass. So in some ways it makes it sound more realistic and more pleasing to the human ear. And the reason why this happens is because when you have all these different waveforms, when you add them together, the harmonics will begin to cancel out the further apart they get due to their phases not aligning properly. So yeah, now that we know the basics of a Reese bass, I'm going to hop into Serum and show you just how to make a basic Reese, and then show you some applications of Reese basses. Alright, so I just opened up Ableton Live and opened up a Serum. The reason why I'm using Serum is just because it's the most widely used synth. I'm going to go ahead and put down some MIDI notes. You can just do it on the lowest octave, then you can get the best feel for the sound. It is a bass, so you're going to want low octave, obviously. Have standard saw wave, because just Serum, default patch. So the next thing I'm going to do is just for visual aid purposes, I'm going to open up an oscilloscope. Just adjust the settings so we can see what's actually going on here. So just a basic saw, obviously. So I'm going to go ahead and draw in a square wave. The nice thing with Serum is it automatically calculates the amplitude of all the harmonics needed to create this waveform if you just draw it in. I have a nice clean square. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shave off all of the high harmonics, just because I am making a bass. I don't need the high end. and it can get a little messy later on. Alright, so cool. So now we just have one waveform. So the way that you get the detuning is you're going to up this unison amount. So now Serum has created 3 oscillators. I'm just going to make them equal in amplitude by using the blend feature, that each play similar notes to each other but with a slight bit of detuning that you can add in with this. So I'm going to go for around 0.14. And I'm going to turn the width down to 0 to make them not spread in the stereo field. So now we can see a similar phenomenon to what we saw in Desmos. The waveform's constantly evolving and the harmonics are constantly changing. If you want, you can turn the randomness down to 0, which will give a slightly different sound, just because all the oscillators will always start at the same phase, whereas if you have it up, it'll have a slightly different sound. I like turning it down just so that I get the same sound every time. It makes it easier to mix. But yeah, so now we can see a very similar phenomenon. You have harmonics phasing in and out constantly, and yeah, it's just a constantly evolving sound, and it's drastically different from just a standard square. So another good thing to do with a Reese bass is I like to just go ahead and put portamento on, just because glide sounds really good with Reese, and then from there, that's pretty much a basic Reese. You can just do some stuff here. For post-processing, for me personally, I would want to grab a limiter just to limit the sound. Add a little bit of compression before the limiter. And do some EQ. Remove the highs completely. Very highs. And then either up the high mids or decrease them depending on the sound I'm going for. And you can see all the harmonics just pulsating, changing their amplitude constantly because of the detuning that we applied to the waveform. So now that's pretty much it for a basic Reese. From here we can just draw in some notes and have it play like a melody or something. And it's already sounding pretty good. From here, it's really all up to you. You can use your plugins, your post-processing, and stuff to make whatever sounds you want. For me personally, I like making Reeses in Massive and not in Serum, but this is a Reese that I made just for demonstration purposes.